The rain drummed against the windows of Fort Bragg's Communications Center as Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell finished her final security briefing of the day. At 38, she'd spent the last 16 years climbing the ranks of military intelligence, specializing in defense contracts and classified procurement systems. Her uniform bore the weight of commendations earned in 3 deployments, but tonight, none of that seemed to matter as she stared at the cream-colored envelope that had been waiting on her desk. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The elegant script across the front read, Colonel Sarah Mitchell. In handwriting she recognized immediately. Her younger sister Victoria's careful penmanship, perfected during years at Swiss boarding schools and Ivy League universities. The return address made Sarah's stomach tighten. Victory Tech Industries, Executive Offices, Manhattan, New York. Sarah had been avoiding this moment for 2 weeks, ever since her assistant had placed the invitation on her desk with a knowing look. Everyone on base knew about Victoria Mitchell Kane, the tech billionaire whose face graced magazine covers and whose company had revolutionized artificial intelligence systems. What they didn't know was how completely the two sisters had drifted apart over the years, or how every family interaction had become a careful dance around unspoken resentments. She broke the wax seal with her letter opener and pulled out the invitation. Heavy cardstock gold embossing, the kind of quality that whispered money without shouting it. Victory Tech Industries cordially invites you to celebrate our 10th anniversary and the launch of our revolutionary Nexus AI platform. Join us for an evening of innovation, excellence, and vision for the future. The date was 3 weeks away, a Saturday night in Manhattan, black tie required. RSVP to Victoria's personal assistant. Sarah turned the invitation over and found a handwritten note in Victoria's familiar scrawl. Sarah, it would mean everything to have family there for this milestone. Please try to make it Van. The word family stung more than Victoria probably intended. When had they stopped feeling like sisters and started feeling like distant relatives who shared DNA but little else? Sarah remembered when Victoria was 10 and she was 16, how her little sister would sneak into her room at night, desperate to hear stories about boys and high school drama. Back then, Sarah had been the protective older sister, the one Victoria looked up to and confided in. Everything changed when their parents died in a car accident during Sarah's second year at West Point. Victoria was only 14, suddenly orphaned and lost. Sarah had wanted to leave the academy, to come home and take care of her sister, but their grandmother had insisted Victoria needed stability, not a teenage guardian figure out her own life. Victoria was sent to live with their wealthy aunt in Connecticut, where she was enrolled in exclusive schools and surrounded by the kind of privilege their middle-class family had never known. The military became Sarah's anchor during those dark months. The structure, the mission, the sense of purpose. It gave her something to hold on to when everything else felt uncertain. She threw herself into her studies, graduated near the top of her class, and began building a career that gave her life meaning. Meanwhile, Victoria flourished in her new environment, showing an early aptitude for technology and business that impressed everyone around her. They'd grown apart gradually, then suddenly. Different worlds, different values, different definitions of success. Victoria built her empire in Silicon Valley before moving her headquarters to Manhattan, while Sarah moved from base to base, deployment to deployment, serving her country in ways that rarely made headlines. Their conversations became stilted, limited to major holidays and family obligations, marked by awkward silences and careful avoidance of anything that might reveal how little they actually knew about each other's lives. The last time Sarah had seen Victoria was 18 months ago, at their grandmother's funeral in Hartford. Victoria had arrived in a Blacktown car, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. She'd been gracious and composed, handling the funeral arrangements with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing complex operations. But there had been a distance between them, a formality that felt more appropriate for business acquaintances than siblings. During the reception, Victoria had asked about Sarah's career with the polite interest she might show a stranger. Still in the army, I see. That's nice. Very stable. The words had been perfectly pleasant, but something in her tone suggested she viewed Sarah's military service as quaint, like a hobby that had gone on too long. When Sarah had tried to explain her work in intelligence and defense contracts, Victoria's attention had drifted to her phone, responding to what she described as urgent business matters. Now holding the invitation in her office at Fort Bragg, Sarah wondered if accepting would be a mistake. Victory Tech's anniversary celebration would be a showcase of everything Victoria had built: her success, her wealth, her position at the pinnacle of American technology. Sarah would be the sister who'd chosen service over profit, duty over innovation, a life of military housing and government salary over Manhattan penthouses and private jets. But beneath her reluctance was something else: curiosity. Sarah had followed Victoria's career from a distance, reading articles about Victory Tech's meteoric rise and her sister's reputation as a visionary leader. She'd watched Victoria transform from a grieving teenager into one of the most powerful women in America, and despite their differences, she felt proud of what her sister had accomplished. The rational part of Sarah's mind recognized this invitation as an olive branch, Victoria's attempt to bridge the gap that had widened between them over the years. The anniversary celebration was clearly important to her sister, a milestone worth sharing with family, despite the complications their relationship had developed. Sarah's secure phone buzzed with an incoming message from her commanding officer. 3 more contracts required her review before morning, classified procurement documents that would determine which companies received lucrative Defense Department funding. She glanced at the stack of files on her desk, each one containing sensitive information about military spending priorities and technological requirements. Her work in military intelligence had given her a unique perspective on the intersection between defense spending and private industry. She understood how government contracts could make or break technology companies, how a single military endorsement could transform a struggling startup into a billion-dollar enterprise. It was a world that operated largely in shadow, where relationships and trust mattered more than public recognition. As she opened the first contract file, Sarah made her decision. She would attend Victoria's celebration, not as the sister seeking approval or trying to compete, but as someone genuinely interested in reconnecting with the only family she had left. Whatever tensions existed between them, they were still sisters, still connected by shared history and the memory of parents who would have wanted them to support each other. She reached for her phone and called Victoria's assistant, confirming her attendance at the anniversary celebration. The conversation was brief and professional. Arrival time, dress code, special dietary requirements. No personal message from Victoria, no direct contact between the sisters. But it was a start. 3 weeks later, Sarah would discover that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with good intentions alone. And sometimes, the person you're trying to reconnect with has already decided you don't belong in their world. The weeks following Sarah's RSVP passed in a blur of classified briefings and security clearances, but the upcoming anniversary celebration loomed over every routine task. She found herself researching Victory Tech's recent developments during her off hours, scrolling through financial reports and technology journals that painted Victoria as a revolutionary force in artificial intelligence and defense technology. What struck Sarah most wasn't the impressive revenue figures or the glowing profiles in Forbes and Fortune, but the subtle details that revealed how completely Victoria had reinvented herself. In interviews, she spoke with the polished confidence of someone who'd never known doubt, her answers peppered with references to market disruption and technological paradigms that felt like a foreign language to Sarah. The awkward teenager who used to practice conversations in the mirror had become someone who commanded boardrooms and influenced global technology trends. The transformation was remarkable, but it also highlighted the growing chasm between their worlds. Sarah's days were structured around operational security, chain of command, and mission objectives that couldn't be discussed outside classified briefings. Victoria's interviews revealed a life of venture capital meetings, innovation summits, and strategic partnerships with companies whose names appeared regularly in Sarah's intelligence reports. Colonel Hayes, Sarah's commanding officer, noticed her distraction during their weekly review meeting. "Mitchell, you've been reviewing those procurement contracts for 20 minutes without turning a page. Something on your mind? Sarah set down the classified folder she'd been staring at without reading. Permission to speak freely, sir? Always. My sister's having a company anniversary celebration next weekend. I'm trying to decide if attending is a good idea. Sarah had worked under Hayes for 3 years, and he'd become something of a mentor figure, someone whose judgment she trusted even on personal matters. Hayes leaned back in his chair, studying her with the attention he usually reserved for strategic assessments. This would be Victoria Mitchell-Kane? Victory Tech Industries? Quote. Sarah nodded, not surprised that Hayes knew about Victoria. The military intelligence community was smaller than most people realized, and successful defense contractors were always on their radar. Interesting company, Hayes said carefully. They've been making moves in the AI defense sector. Very ambitious, very well connected. He paused, choosing his words with the precision of someone who dealt in classified information. Have you kept in touch with her business operations? Not really. We don't talk much about work when we do talk, which isn't often. Sarah realized how pathetic that sounded. Siblings who'd grown so far apart, they couldn't even discuss their careers. Family dynamics can be complicated, Hayes observed, especially when you're in different fields. But Mitchell, you should know that Victory Tech has been pursuing several major defense contracts recently. Their AI systems are impressive, but they're new to the military procurement process. They don't have the relationships or clearances that established defense contractors have built over decades. The implication hung in the air between them. Sarah's expertise in defense procurement made her valuable not just to the military, but potentially to companies like Victory Tech that were trying to break into the lucrative world of government contracts. She wondered if Victoria's invitation was purely personal, or if there might be business considerations involved. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I'm not suggesting anything improper, Hayes continued, but you should be aware that your position gives you access to information that would be extremely valuable to someone in your sister's position. Just something to keep in mind. That evening, Sarah sat in her sparse base housing apartment, surrounded by the utilitarian furniture and generic artwork that characterized military accommodations. Her laptop was open to Victory Tech's website, displaying glossy photos of their Manhattan headquarters, 40 floors of steel and glass that housed what the company described as the future of human-AI collaboration. She clicked through the executive profiles, finding Victoria's official headshot near the top of the leadership team. Her sister looked polished and confident, wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than Sarah's dress uniform. The biography beneath the photo was impressive. MBA from Wharton, previous experience at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey, recognized as one of Fortune's 40 under 40 inches business leaders. But it was also sterile, completely divorced from the girl Sarah remembered. No mention of their parents, their middle-class upbringing in suburban Ohio, or the scholarship that had made Victoria's elite education possible. She'd become Victoria Mitchell-Kane, hyphenating her name with her ex-husband's surname even after their divorce, as if creating distance from her origins. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting her research. Victoria's name appeared on the screen, the first direct call between them in months. Sarah, I'm so glad you're coming to the anniversary celebration. Victoria's voice carried the polished enthusiasm of someone accustomed to managing high-stakes conversations. I wasn't sure you'd be able to get away from work. I managed to arrange leave, Sarah replied, settling back in her chair. Congratulations on the anniversary. 10 years is quite an accomplishment. Thank you. It's been an incredible journey. Actually, that's part of why I wanted to talk to you. I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about how we've both built these amazing careers but somehow drifted apart in the process. Sarah heard something underneath Victoria's words, not quite vulnerability, but perhaps a recognition that success hadn't filled whatever emotional gaps their parents' death had created. I've been thinking about that too. I know we haven't been as close as we should be, Victoria continued, but seeing what you've accomplished in the military, the expertise you've developed in defense systems and procurement, I'm really proud of you, Sarah, and I think there might be ways we could support each other professionally, in addition to reconnecting personally. There it was. The business angle Hayes had hinted at. Sarah felt a familiar mixture of disappointment and resignation. Even Victoria's attempts at reconciliation came with underlying strategic considerations. What kind of support are you thinking about? Sarah asked, keeping her tone neutral. Well, Victory Tech is expanding into defense applications for our AI systems. It's a complex market, and frankly, we could use guidance from someone who understands military requirements and procurement processes. Not anything inappropriate, of course, just general industry insight that might help us serve our country more effectively. The words were carefully chosen, technically appropriate, but clearly designed to extract information that could give Victory Tech competitive advantages in bidding for defense contracts. Sarah realized that her sister had spent the last 10 years not just building a technology empire, but learning how to leverage relationships for business gain. That's interesting, Sarah said. I'd be happy to share general information about military technology needs. Within appropriate boundaries, of course. Of course. I would never ask you to compromise your position or ethics. I just think it would be wonderful if we could find ways to collaborate, maybe even work together in some capacity down the road. After they hung up, Sarah sat in the quiet of her apartment, processing the conversation. Victoria's invitation was genuine, but it was also strategic. Her sister had built a billion-dollar empire by identifying opportunities and leveraging every available resource, including family connections. The realization should have angered Sarah, but instead she felt a strange sense of clarity. She would attend the anniversary celebration, not as the naive older sister hoping for emotional reconciliation, but as a military intelligence officer who understood exactly what she represented to Victoria's business interests. She opened her laptop and began reviewing the latest defense procurement reports, paying particular attention to AI and technology contracts that might interest Victory Tech. If Victoria wanted to play strategic games, Sarah would make sure she understood the full scope of what she was dealing with. The celebration was still a week away, but Sarah had already learned something valuable. Her sister hadn't just changed her name and address over the years. She'd fundamentally altered her approach to relationships, viewing even family connections through the lens of potential business advantage. It was going to be an interesting evening in Manhattan. The Victory Tech headquarters towered over Fifth Avenue like a monument to technological ambition, its glass facade reflecting the bustling energy of Manhattan's business district. Sarah stood on the sidewalk across the street, watching executives and guests arrive for the anniversary celebration. Blacktown cars and luxury SUVs deposited passengers in elegant evening wear, a parade of wealth and influence that represented the pinnacle of American corporate power. She adjusted her evening gown, a navy blue dress she'd purchased specifically for tonight from a department store in Fayetteville. It was elegant, but modest, nothing like the designer creations she observed flowing through Victory Tech's lobby. Her military bearing made her stand straighter than the other guests, but she knew she looked exactly like what she was, someone from outside this world, trying to fit into spaces designed for different kinds of success. The lobby was a cathedral of modern design, with soaring ceilings and digital displays showcasing Victory Tech's latest innovations. Holographic projections demonstrated AI systems managing everything from supply chains to autonomous vehicles, while ambient lighting cast everything in a blue glow that suggested technological sophistication. Sarah felt like she was entering a science fiction movie, complete with servers offering champagne from crystal flutes and ambient music that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Colonel Mitchell, a young woman in a perfectly tailored black suit, approached with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing high-profile events. I'm Jennifer Walsh, Victoria's executive assistant. She's so excited you could make it tonight. Sarah accepted a glass of champagne and followed Jennifer toward the elevator bank, noting the subtle security measures that most guests probably overlooked. Discreet cameras, badge readers, and personnel who were clearly more than decorative staff. Victory Tech took security seriously, which made sense for a company handling sensitive technology contracts. The executive floors occupied the top 10 stories of the building, and the elevator ride to the 40th floor offered glimpses of the empire Victoria had built. Each floor they passed buzzed with activity, even on a Saturday evening, with employees working late on projects that would shape the future of artificial intelligence. Victoria's been talking about you all week, Jennifer said as they rose through the building. She's very proud of your military service. She often mentions having a sister in Army intelligence. The comment surprised Sarah. Victoria rarely discussed family in public, preferring to maintain the carefully crafted image of someone who'd built her success through pure determination and intelligence. The fact that she'd been mentioning Sarah suggested either genuine affection or strategic positioning. The 40th floor was transformed into an elegant party space, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Manhattan. The guest list read like a who's who of American technology and defense industries: venture capitalists, government officials, military contractors, and technology visionaries. Sarah recognized several faces from congressional hearings and defense briefings, people whose decisions influenced billions in government spending. Sarah! Victoria materialized from a group of executives, her approach perfectly timed and graceful. She wore a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly salary, her jewelry subtle but clearly expensive. The awkward teenager Sarah remembered had been completely replaced by someone who commanded attention through presence and confidence. Victoria. Sarah accepted her sister's air kiss, noting the expensive perfume and the way other guests tracked Victoria's movements across the room. Congratulations, this is incredible. Thank you. It's been quite a journey. Victoria's smile was radiant but practiced, the expression of someone accustomed to being photographed and quoted. Come, let me introduce you to some people. I think you'll find the conversations fascinating. Sarah found herself swept into a series of introductions that felt more like strategic networking than social gathering. Victoria presented her as my brilliant sister, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, who specializes in defense procurement and military intelligence. Each introduction was followed by business cards and invitations to discuss potential collaborations. Colonel Mitchell, said Robert Hayes, CEO of Dynacorp Industries, one of the largest defense contractors in the country. Your sister tells me you have extensive experience with AI integration in military systems. We'd love to get your thoughts on some of our upcoming proposals. The conversation continued in this vein, with executives from various technology companies probing for insights into military requirements and procurement processes. Sarah answered carefully, sharing only publicly available information while recognizing that even her general observations were valuable intelligence for companies competing for government contracts. This is Dr. Elizabeth Montgomery, Victoria said, introducing Sarah to a woman in her 50s who radiated academic authority. She's been leading our Nexus AI development team. Elizabeth, this is my sister Sarah, the one I told you about. Dr. Montgomery's handshake was firm, her gaze appraising. Colonel Mitchell, Victoria speaks very highly of your expertise in defense systems. I'd love to get your perspective on military applications for autonomous decision-making platforms. That's a fascinating area, Sarah replied diplomatically. The military is certainly interested in AI applications that can enhance operational effectiveness while maintaining appropriate human oversight. Exactly, Victoria interjected. Sarah has such valuable insights into how these technologies could serve our national defense interests. We've been discussing potential collaboration opportunities. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. Victoria wasn't just introducing her to colleagues. She was positioning her as a potential asset for Victory Tech's government contracting efforts. Every conversation, every introduction, was designed to demonstrate Sarah's value to the company's strategic objectives. The evening continued with a formal presentation about Victory Tech's achievements and future plans. Victoria took the stage with the confidence of someone who'd delivered hundreds of similar presentations, her voice carrying across the room as she outlined the company's vision for AI-enhanced defense systems. At Victory Tech, we believe that artificial intelligence represents the future of national security, Victoria declared. Our Nexus platform can process threat assessments, coordinate logistics, and support strategic decision-making at speeds that human operators simply cannot match. We're not replacing human judgment. We're enhancing it with tools that can save lives and protect American interests around the world. The presentation was impressive, showcasing technology that would indeed be valuable for military applications. Sarah recognized several systems that aligned with current defense priorities, solutions that could address real operational challenges she'd encountered in her intelligence work. But as Victoria continued her presentation, Sarah noticed something troubling. Many of the military requirements and technological gaps that Victoria described weren't publicly available information. They reflected insights that could only come from someone with access to classified procurement documents or strategic planning meetings. Our research indicates that current military AI systems are inadequate for multi-domain operations, Victoria continued. Specifically, there are gaps in real-time intelligence analysis and cross-platform communication protocols that create vulnerabilities in complex operational environments. Sarah's stomach dropped. Victoria was describing specific deficiencies in classified military systems. Information that shouldn't be available to civilian contractors without proper security clearances and need-to-know authorization. Either Victory Tech had obtained this information through inappropriate channels, or Victoria was making educated guesses that happened to be remarkably accurate. As the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, Sarah began to understand that tonight's celebration was more than a company anniversary. It was a demonstration of Victory Tech's readiness to compete for major defense contracts, using information and insights that gave them significant advantages over competitors. And somehow, Victoria had positioned Sarah's attendance as implicit endorsement of the company's capabilities and trustworthiness. Sarah realized she wasn't just a guest at her sister's party. She was being used as a prop in a larger strategic performance designed to impress potential government clients. The evening was far from over, but Sarah had already learned something important. Victoria hadn't just built a successful technology company. She'd created an operation sophisticated enough to gather and leverage classified information in ways that skirted the boundaries of what was legal and appropriate. The question now was whether Victoria realized how dangerous this game had become, and whether Sarah was willing to continue playing her assigned role. The dinner portion of the evening took place in Victory Tech's executive dining room, a space that managed to be both intimate and imposing. 20 tables of 8 were arranged beneath a ceiling that displayed real-time constellations, while servers moved between guests with military precision. Sarah found herself seated at table 3, close enough to the head table to observe Victoria's interactions, but far enough away to feel like a spectator rather than a participant. Her table mates represented the intersection of technology, defense, and government that defined modern military contracting. To her left sat Congressman Bradley Walsh, chair of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Intelligence and Special Operations. Across from her was General Patricia Martinez, recently retired from the Pentagon and now serving on the boards of 3 major defense contractors. These weren't just successful people. They were individuals who shaped policy and controlled budgets that could make or break companies like Victory Tech. Colonel Mitchell, Congressman Walsh said as the first course arrived, "Your sister tells me you've been instrumental in modernizing military intelligence procurement processes. Fascinating work, I imagine." Sarah chose her words carefully. "The military is always working to improve how we evaluate and implement new technologies, Congressman. It's a complex process that requires balancing innovation with security requirements." "Indeed," General Martinez interjected. "Though I have to say, some of the young companies today seem to have a better grasp of military needs than contractors who've been in the business for decades." Victoria's presentation tonight was remarkably insightful. The comment sent another chill through Sarah. General Martinez had access to some of the most sensitive information in the defense establishment. If she was impressed by Victoria's apparent understanding of military requirements, it suggested that Victory Tech's intelligence gathering was even more sophisticated than Sarah had initially realized. "Victoria has always been brilliant at understanding complex systems," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Even as a child, she had an intuitive grasp of how things worked." What she didn't say was that Victoria's childhood talent had apparently evolved into something far more concerning. As dinner progressed, Sarah listened to conversations that revealed the depth of Victory Tech's government connections. Board members included former military officials, retired intelligence leaders, and policy advisors who moved seamlessly between government service and private sector consulting. "Colonel," said Dr. James Crawford, a former NSA deputy director who now served on Victory Tech's advisory board, "I'm curious about your perspective on AI integration in classified environments. There seems to be some resistance within the military to fully embracing autonomous systems." The question was a trap, designed to elicit information about internal military debates regarding AI deployment. Sarah recognized the technique from her own intelligence training. casual conversation that gradually extracted sensitive information through seemingly innocent inquiries. The military takes a measured approach to any new technology, Sarah answered, especially systems that could impact operational security or decision-making in critical situations. Of course, Dr. Crawford nodded. Though I imagine there's pressure to move faster, given what our adversaries are developing. China's AI military applications are advancing rapidly. Sarah noticed Victoria watching this exchange from the head table, her expression unreadable but attentive. It was becoming clear that Sarah's presence served multiple purposes beyond family reconciliation. She was both a trophy, proof of Victory Tech's family values and patriotic credentials, and a potential source of intelligence that could inform the company's strategic planning. The main course brought a shift in conversation, as Congressman Walsh began discussing recent defense budget allocations. We're looking at significant increases in AI and autonomous systems funding next fiscal year, he said. Companies that can demonstrate proven capabilities and appropriate security protocols will be well positioned for major contracts. That's encouraging, said Margaret Cole, Victory Tech's chief operating officer who had been quietly observing the table dynamics. We've been investing heavily in security infrastructure and clearance processes. We understand that trust is fundamental to working with sensitive government systems. Quote. General Martinez smiled. I've been impressed by Victory Tech's approach to security. Very thorough, very professional. Colonel Mitchell, you must be proud of what your sister has built here. The comment forced Sarah into an impossible position. Agreeing would suggest endorsement of Victory Tech's business practices, which she was increasingly questioning. Disagreeing would create tension that could damage both her relationship with Victoria and her own professional standing. Victoria has always been ambitious and driven, Sarah said carefully. She's built something remarkable. As dessert was served, the conversation turned more personal, but in ways that made Sarah increasingly uncomfortable. Victoria approached their table, wine glass in hand, her smile bright enough to light the room. I hope my sister isn't boring you all with military protocol stories, Victoria said, her tone playful but with an edge Sarah recognized from their childhood arguments. Sarah's always been the responsible one, following rules and procedures. Very different from those of us who prefer to move fast and break things. The reference to Silicon Valley's infamous motto felt like a deliberate contrast between their approaches to life and work. Victoria was positioning herself as the innovative disruptor, while characterizing Sarah as a bureaucratic rule follower. On the contrary, Congressman Walsh replied, Colonel Mitchell has been sharing fascinating insights about military modernization efforts. She clearly understands both the technical requirements and the institutional challenges involved in implementing new systems. Oh, Sarah definitely knows where all the bodies are buried, Victoria laughed, the comment striking Sarah as deliberately ambiguous. She's been in military intelligence for so long, I'm sure she has stories that would curl your hair. Though of course, she's far too professional to share classified information. The statement served as both praise and warning, acknowledging Sarah's access to sensitive information, while publicly establishing that sharing such information would be inappropriate. It was a masterful piece of social manipulation that demonstrated Victoria's understanding of how to navigate conversations involving classified material. Dr. Crawford leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. Colonel, your work must give you a unique perspective on emerging threats and capability gaps. I imagine you see patterns that others might miss. Quote, Sarah felt the weight of multiple agendas pressing against her professional obligations. These weren't casual dinner party questions. They were intelligence-gathering operations disguised as social conversation. Victoria had orchestrated this entire evening to extract maximum value from Sarah's expertise and connections. I see the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries between intelligence work and civilian business interests, Sarah replied, her tone cooler than before. The military takes information security very seriously. Victoria's smile faltered slightly, recognizing the subtle rebuke in Sarah's response. Of course. We would never want to put Sarah in an uncomfortable position. Family dinners can be tricky when you mix business with pleasure. But the damage was already done. Sarah realized that everyone at the table understood she was being courted for information and influence, and that Victoria's invitation had been fundamentally transactional. She wasn't here as a beloved sister celebrating family success. She was here as a potential asset whose value lay in her security clearances and government connections. The evening continued with increasingly pointed questions disguised as friendly conversation, each inquiry designed to probe the boundaries of what Sarah might share. As coffee was served, she understood that she had become part of an elaborate performance designed to demonstrate Victory Tech's access to military intelligence expertise. Victoria hadn't just invited her to reconnect as sisters. She had orchestrated Sarah's attendance as part of a larger strategy to position Victory Tech for major defense contracts, using their family relationship as leverage in a game Sarah was only beginning to understand. The evening moved to Victory Tech's rooftop terrace, where Manhattan's skyline created a glittering backdrop for what Victoria announced as intimate conversations with our most valued partners. Sarah found herself standing near the glass railing, champagne untouched in her hand, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. The cool night air provided welcome relief from the suffocating atmosphere of strategic networking disguised as celebration. Quite a view, isn't it? Sarah turned to find Thomas Kane, Victoria's ex-husband, approaching with 2 fresh glasses of wine. She hadn't seen him in years, not since their divorce had been finalized with the same efficiency Victoria applied to business mergers. He looked older, more weathered than she remembered, but his smile carried genuine warmth that had been absent from most interactions tonight. "Tom, I wasn't sure you'd be here." Sarah accepted the wine, grateful for a conversation that might not involve extracting classified information. "Victoria and I maintain a good working relationship," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I'm still on Victory Tech's board, and we have some shared business interests. Plus, she thought it would be good for appearances if we demonstrated our mature post-divorce relationship." The phrase "good for appearances" struck Sarah as perfectly characteristic of how Victoria approached personal relationships. Even her ex-husband's presence was calculated to reinforce her image as someone who maintained professional relationships despite personal complications. "How are you holding up tonight?" Tom asked, studying Sarah's expression with the attention of someone who understood family dynamics. "I remember how these Victory Tech events can be intense." Sarah appreciated his directness. "I'm beginning to understand that this invitation wasn't entirely about family reconciliation." Tom nodded grimly. "Victoria's very good at finding ways to serve multiple objectives with single actions. It's what makes her successful in business, but it can be challenging in personal relationships." Before Sarah could respond, Victoria materialized beside them, with the precision timing she'd displayed all evening. Her smile was radiant, but Sarah caught a flicker of annoyance that Tom was monopolizing her attention. "Tom, thank you for keeping Sarah company. I hope you're both enjoying the evening." Victoria's voice carried the pleasant authority of a hostess managing her event. "Sarah, there are some people I'd love you to meet. Pentagon officials who are here tonight specifically because they heard you'd be attending." The statement confirmed Sarah's growing suspicions. Victoria had used her name and position to attract government officials to this event, leveraging their family relationship for business advantage, without asking permission, or even informing her in advance. "Actually, Victoria, I think we need to talk privately," Sarah said, her military training keeping her voice level despite the anger building in her chest. "Of course, but first, just 5 minutes with Deputy Secretary Morrison. He's very interested in discussing military AI requirements with someone who has your expertise." Quote. Victoria's hand on Sarah's arm felt like a gentle cage, guiding her toward a group of officials Sarah recognized from Pentagon briefings. She realized that refusing would create a scene that could damage both their reputations, while participating would further compromise her professional integrity. "Victoria, I need to speak with you now," Sarah said more firmly, removing her sister's hand from her arm. For the first time all evening, Victoria's composure cracked slightly. Her smile remained perfect, but her eyes flashed with frustration. "Sarah, please. This is important for your business, I understand." Sarah kept her voice low but unmistakably serious. "That's exactly what we need to discuss." Victoria glanced around the terrace, noting the attention their conversation was drawing from other guests. Her executive assistant appeared as if summoned, ready to manage whatever crisis was developing. Jennifer, could you ensure our guests have everything they need? Sarah and I are going to step inside for a moment. Victoria's tone was professional, but Sarah caught the underlying tension. They moved to Victoria's private office on the 39th floor, a space that reflected her personality perfectly. Sleek furniture, multiple monitors displaying real-time business data, and walls covered with awards, patents, and photos with influential government officials. The office felt more like a command center than a workspace. Sarah, what's wrong? Victoria asked, closing the door behind them. I thought the evening was going wonderfully. Everyone's been so impressed with you. Impressed with what, exactly? My security clearances? My access to classified procurement information? My potential value as an intelligence source for Victory Tech? Victoria's expression shifted, the polished executive facade giving way to something harder and more calculating. You're being dramatic. I invited you because you're my sister, and I wanted you here for this important milestone. And because having a lieutenant colonel in military intelligence at your anniversary celebration would impress Pentagon officials and potential government clients. Sarah moved to the window, looking down at the city below. How long have you been planning this, Victoria? Planning what? I don't understand why you're upset. Sarah turned back to face her sister, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time in years. You've turned our family relationship into a business asset. Tonight isn't about reconnecting as sisters. It's about positioning Victory Tech for defense contracts by demonstrating your access to military intelligence expertise. Victoria's silence confirmed what Sarah had suspected. The careful orchestration of introductions, the strategic questions from dinner companions, the Pentagon officials who had attended specifically to meet her, all of it had been planned to extract maximum business value from Sarah's presence. Sarah, you're not being fair, Victoria said finally. Yes, I thought your expertise might be valuable for Victory Tech's government business. But that doesn't mean I don't care about our relationship. Can't this be both personal and professional? Not when you don't ask permission before using my name and position to attract government officials to your party. Not when you present me as an asset, rather than your sister. Victoria moved to her desk, her body language shifting into the defensive posture Sarah remembered from childhood arguments. I've worked incredibly hard to build this company. If having a sister with relevant expertise helps Victory Tech serve our country better, I don't see why that's problematic. Because you're treating classified information and security clearances like networking opportunities. Because you're compromising my professional integrity without my consent. Sarah's voice remained controlled, but her words carried the authority of someone accustomed to command decisions. And because you've apparently forgotten the difference between family relationships and business transactions. The accusation hung between them like a physical barrier. Victoria's face flushed, her careful composure finally cracking completely. You have no idea what it's like to build something from nothing, Victoria snapped. To compete against companies with decades of government relationships and unlimited resources. I'm trying to democratize defense technology, to bring innovation to systems that haven't changed in decades. If using every available advantage makes me calculating, then fine. I'm calculating. Sarah recognized the tone from their childhood, Victoria's voice when she felt cornered and lashed out with whatever weapons were available. But now those weapons included billion-dollar companies and government contracts rather than teenage insults. Including exploiting your sister's security clearances and professional relationships? Exploiting? Victoria's laugh was bitter. I'm offering you opportunities to contribute to something meaningful, to use your expertise in ways that could revolutionize military technology. Most people would be grateful for the chance to have a real impact. The words stung because they contained a grain of truth that Victoria wielded like a blade. Sarah's work in military intelligence was important, but largely invisible. Contributions to national security that would never be publicly recognized or celebrated. Victoria was offering her a chance to be part of something that could change the world, but only as a supporting character in Victoria's larger narrative. I didn't ask for those opportunities, Sarah said quietly. And I certainly didn't give you permission to promise my expertise to Pentagon officials without discussing it with me first. Victoria stared at her for a long moment, and Sarah saw something she hadn't expected in her sister's eyes. Genuine hurt, mixed with anger and frustration. I thought you'd be proud of what I've built, Victoria said, her voice softer but no less intense. "I thought you'd want to be part of it." Sarah felt the weight of their shared history, the years of distance and misunderstanding that had led them to this moment. Victoria had achieved everything their parents had dreamed of and more. But somewhere in that achievement, she'd lost sight of the boundaries between personal relationships and business opportunities. "I am proud of you," Sarah said, "but I can't be the sister you want and the business asset you need. Those are different relationships with different boundaries." Victoria turned away, looking out at the Manhattan skyline that represented her empire. When she spoke again, her voice had returned to its professional tone, but Sarah heard the disappointment underneath. "I suppose we understand each other now." Sarah realized that whatever bridge she'd hoped to rebuild tonight had been burned by business considerations she'd never fully understood. Victoria hadn't just invited her to celebrate, she'd invited her to choose between family loyalty and professional integrity. And Sarah had made her choice. The silence in Victoria's office stretched between them like a chasm that decades of shared history couldn't bridge. Sarah stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the pulse of Manhattan traffic 40 floors below while processing the magnitude of what had just transpired. Behind her, Victoria remained at her desk, fingers drumming against the polished surface, with the restless energy of someone accustomed to controlling every variable in her environment. "So that's it?" Victoria's voice cut through the quiet sharp with the kind of controlled anger that had defined their childhood arguments. "You're going to walk away from the biggest opportunity either of us has ever had because of some outdated notion about mixing family and business?" Sarah turned from the window, her military bearing evident in the precise way she moved and the measured calm in her voice. "This isn't about outdated notions, Victoria. This is about the fact that you've built your business strategy around information and relationships that you have no right to access." "What are you talking about?" Victoria's tone carried genuine confusion, mixed with defensive hostility. "Everything Victory Tech has accomplished has been through legitimate research, innovation, and market analysis." Sarah moved to one of the chairs facing Victoria's desk, settling into it with the deliberate calm she'd learned in hostile interrogation training. The shift in her posture was subtle but unmistakable. She was no longer the uncertain sister seeking reconciliation, but a military intelligence officer conducting an operation. "Victoria, I've spent the evening listening to you and your team demonstrate knowledge of classified military AI deficiencies, specific procurement requirements that haven't been made public, and strategic priorities that are compartmentalized within the highest levels of defense planning." Sarah's voice remained level, but her words carried the weight of accumulated evidence. "Where exactly did Victory Tech acquire this information?" For the first time all evening, Victoria appeared genuinely taken aback. Her confidence wavered as she processed the implications of Sarah's question, realizing that her sister's expertise worked both ways. Sarah could identify inappropriate information access just as easily as she could provide it. "I don't know what you're suggesting," Victoria said carefully, "but Victory Tech operates within all applicable laws and regulations. We have former military personnel on our advisory board who provide general insights into defense requirements." "General insights don't include specific vulnerability assessments for classified communication protocols," Sarah replied. "They don't include internal Pentagon debates about AI deployment timelines that haven't been shared outside of secured briefing rooms." Victoria's face had gone pale, but she maintained her defensive posture. "You're making assumptions based on—" "I'm making observations based on 16 years of military intelligence experience," Sarah interrupted, her tone sharpening slightly. "And what I observed tonight was a company that has somehow gained access to information that requires security clearances and need-to-know authorization that Victory Tech doesn't possess." The accusation hung in the air between them like an unexploded ordnance. Victoria stood from her desk, moving to the window where Sarah had been standing, her reflection ghost-like against the city lights. "Sarah, even if what you're suggesting were true, which it isn't, what exactly do you think you're going to do about it?" The question revealed the fundamental difference in how the sisters understood power. Victoria saw influence in terms of wealth, connections, and market position. Sarah understood it in terms of information, authority, and institutional leverage. I'm going to tell you something that might help you understand your actual situation, Sarah said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used for classified briefings. Do you know what I actually do in my position at Fort Bragg? Victoria turned back toward her sister, something in Sarah's tone triggering genuine attention for the first time since their private conversation had begun. I oversee defense contractor vetting and security compliance for AI procurement contracts, Sarah continued. Specifically, I'm responsible for evaluating whether technology companies have appropriate security protocols, personnel clearances, and information handling procedures to work on classified military systems. The color drained completely from Victoria's face as the implications became clear. Sarah wasn't just a military officer with relevant expertise. She was the military officer who would evaluate Victory Tech's eligibility for the contracts Victoria had spent the evening positioning the company to pursue. More importantly, Sarah continued, I'm the person who investigates potential security breaches and unauthorized information access by civilian contractors. When companies demonstrate knowledge they shouldn't possess, I'm the one who determines whether they represent a security risk to ongoing military operations. Quote. Victoria sat down heavily in her chair, the calculated confidence that had defined her all evening finally giving way to something approaching panic. Sarah, you can't seriously be suggesting that Victory Tech has done anything improper. We've been extremely careful about what, exactly? Sarah's interruption was sharp and precise. About how you've obtained classified information? About which of your government connections has been sharing details about military requirements that haven't been made public? About how you've convinced Pentagon officials to attend tonight's celebration by promising access to military intelligence expertise through your family connections. Each question hit like a targeted strike, revealing the depth of Sarah's understanding of the situation Victoria had created. The sister who had seemed naive and out of place all evening had actually been conducting a comprehensive assessment of Victory Tech's operations and practices. I need you to understand something, Victoria, Sarah said, leaning forward slightly. The contracts you're pursuing, the ones that would make Victory Tech a major defense supplier, they all require my recommendation for security clearance approval. Every single one. Victoria's breathing had become shallow, her executive composure completely shattered by the realization that she had spent the evening trying to manipulate the very person whose approval she needed for Victory Tech's future success. But that's not the worst part, Sarah continued, her voice now carrying the cold authority of someone delivering an ultimatum. The worst part is that by demonstrating unauthorized access to classified information tonight, you've essentially disqualified Victory Tech from consideration for any contracts involving sensitive military systems. Sarah, please. Victoria's voice had lost all its professional polish, reverting to the pleading tone Sarah remembered from their childhood. This is my life's work. I've built something that could genuinely help our country's defense capabilities. You can't destroy it because of some misunderstanding about... This isn't a misunderstanding, Sarah interrupted firmly. This is a security breach. And the fact that you're trying to characterize it as anything else tells me that you don't understand the seriousness of what you've done. Victoria stood abruptly, beginning to pace behind her desk with the frantic energy of someone whose world was collapsing in real time. What do you want, Sarah? Money? A position at Victory Tech? Partnership opportunities? Tell me what it would take to make this go away. The offer confirmed every suspicion Sarah had harbored about Victoria's approach to relationships and obligations. Even now, facing the consequences of her actions, Victoria's first instinct was to treat the situation as a negotiation, rather than an accountability moment. I want you to understand that some things can't be bought or negotiated, Sarah replied. Military security isn't a business opportunity. It's a sacred trust that protects the lives of people who serve our country. Sacred trust? Victoria's laugh was bitter and desperate. Sarah, this is the real world. Defense contracting is about relationships, influence, and competitive advantages. Everyone plays these games. The only difference is that most people are better at hiding it. Sarah stood from her chair, her military bearing emphasizing the moral authority she carried in this moment. No, Victoria. The difference is that most people understand the difference between competitive business practices and security breaches. Most people understand that there are lines you don't cross, even for profit. Victoria stopped pacing, turning to face her sister with a mixture of rage and desperation that made her look younger and more vulnerable than she had all evening. So what happens now? You destroy everything I've built because I tried to include you in my success? What happens now is that you make a choice, Sarah replied. You can voluntarily withdraw Victory Tech's applications for classified contracts and focus on commercial AI development, where your innovations can still make a positive impact. Or you can continue pursuing defense contracts and face a formal security investigation that will examine every aspect of how Victory Tech has obtained sensitive information. The ultimatum was clear and non-negotiable. Victoria could accept limitations on her company's government business, or face the complete destruction of her defense contracting ambitions through official channels. And if I choose the investigation? Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Then I'll recommend a comprehensive audit of Victory Tech's information sources, personnel connections, and business practices by the Defense Security Service, Sarah replied. Given what I've observed tonight, I doubt your company would survive that level of scrutiny with its government eligibility intact. Victoria collapsed into her chair, the weight of her impossible situation finally overwhelming her ability to maintain composure. The sister who had tried to use their family relationship for business advantage now faced the choice between voluntary retreat and complete defeat. I thought you'd be proud of what I accomplished, Victoria said quietly, her voice carrying the bewildered hurt of someone whose worldview had been fundamentally challenged. I thought you'd want to be part of something bigger than following orders and filing reports. Sarah felt a moment of genuine sadness for the sister she remembered, the brilliant teenager who had channeled her grief over their parents' death into extraordinary achievement. But that sympathy couldn't override her professional obligations or the severity of what Victoria had attempted. I am proud of your technical innovations and business success, Sarah said gently, but I can't be proud of how you've chosen to pursue government contracts. And I won't compromise military security to protect your feelings or preserve our relationship. Victoria looked up at her sister, seeing clearly for the first time the woman Sarah had become, not the rule-following bureaucrat she had dismissed, but a professional with principles that couldn't be bent by family loyalty or business opportunities. How long do I have to decide? Victoria asked. 48 hours, Sarah replied. After that, I file my security assessment report regardless of what you choose. Sarah moved toward the office door, then paused to deliver one final observation that would define their relationship going forward. Victoria, you built an incredible company and developed technology that could genuinely benefit our country's defense capabilities. But you did it by crossing lines that exist to protect the people who risk their lives for our national security. That's not innovation, it's betrayal. She left Victoria alone in her office, surrounded by the awards and achievements that had come at a cost neither sister had fully understood until this moment. 3 months after the anniversary celebration, Sarah sat in her office at Fort Bragg, reviewing the final report on Victory Tech Industries. The company had made its choice within the 48-hour deadline Victoria had been given, officially withdrawing all applications for classified defense contracts and restructuring their business model to focus exclusively on commercial AI development. The decision had saved Victory Tech from a devastating security investigation, but it had also fundamentally altered the company's trajectory. Stock prices had initially plummeted when news of the strategic shift became public, though they had since stabilized as investors recognized the long-term potential of Victoria's commercial innovations. More importantly, the company had avoided the complete destruction that would have resulted from a formal finding of security violations. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Colonel Hayes, requesting her presence in his office. She gathered the Victory Tech files and walked through the corridors of the intelligence building, nodding to colleagues who had followed the case with professional interest. Word had spread quickly through military intelligence circles about the contractor, who had voluntarily withdrawn from classified work rather than face investigation. Come in, Mitchell, Hayes said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I've been reviewing your final assessment of the Victory Tech situation. Excellent work, by the way. Clean resolution, minimal publicity, and a clear message to other contractors about appropriate boundaries. "Thank you, sir. The company made the right choice, even if it took some persuasion." Hayes studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I imagine this situation was complicated by the family relationship involved. That couldn't have been easy to navigate." Sarah had wondered when this conversation would occur. The personal dimensions of the Victory Tech case had been impossible to hide completely, though she had maintained strict professional standards throughout her handling of the investigation. "It was challenging, sir, but the security implications were clear regardless of any personal considerations." "Indeed, which brings me to something else." Hayes opened a folder on his desk, revealing documents with classification markings Sarah recognized. "Your work on this case, and your broader expertise in contractor security assessment, has attracted attention at higher levels. The Pentagon is establishing a new oversight position focused specifically on emerging technology contractors and information security protocols." Sarah felt a flutter of interest, despite her efforts to maintain professional composure. Positions at the Pentagon represented significant career advancement and the opportunity to influence policy at the highest levels of defense planning. The role would involve developing comprehensive security frameworks for AI and technology procurement, overseeing contractor compliance across all service branches, and serving as liaison between military intelligence and civilian technology companies. Hayes paused, allowing the scope of the opportunity to register. "Your name has been recommended for the position." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. Victoria's attempt to leverage their family relationship for business advantage had ultimately led to Sarah's recognition as an expert in exactly the kind of contractor oversight that companies like Victory Tech needed to navigate successfully. "I'm honored by the recommendation, sir. When would a decision need to be made?" "Within the next 2 weeks. The position would require relocation to the D.C. area and likely promotion to full colonel within 18 months. Hayes closed the folder, his expression becoming more personal. "Mitchell, you've handled a difficult situation with integrity and professionalism. This promotion would be well-deserved recognition of your expertise and judgment." After leaving Hayes' office, Sarah drove to her apartment in Fayetteville, processing the magnitude of what the Pentagon position would mean for her career and life. The work would be challenging and meaningful, establishing policies that would protect military security while enabling innovation from legitimate technology companies. Her phone rang as she pulled into her parking spot, Victoria's name appearing on the screen for the first time since the anniversary celebration. Sarah hesitated, then answered. "Sarah?" Victoria's voice was different, quieter, less polished than the executive persona Sarah had encountered in Manhattan. "Victoria, how are you?" "I'm adjusting. The commercial pivot has been challenging, but we're finding our footing. Our consumer AI products are gaining traction, and we've secured some interesting partnerships with healthcare and education companies." Quote, Sarah heard something in her sister's tone that hadn't been there before, humility mixed with genuine uncertainty about the future. "I'm glad things are stabilizing. I wanted to call because I've been thinking about our conversation that night, about the things you said about betrayal and sacred trust." Victoria paused, and Sarah could hear traffic noise in the background, suggesting she was walking rather than calling from her office. "You were right. I lost sight of why the boundaries exist." The admission surprised Sarah. She had expected anger, resentment, or attempts at justification, not accountability and reflection. "I spent so many years focused on building something bigger and more successful than anything our parents could have imagined," Victoria continued. "But somewhere in that process, I forgot that success achieved through compromise of principles isn't really success at all." Sarah felt a stirring of the connection they had shared as children, before ambition and tragedy had pulled them in different directions. "Victoria, what you built is still remarkable. Redirecting toward commercial applications doesn't diminish your technical achievements." "Maybe not, but it forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about how I've approached relationships and obligations over the years." Victoria's laugh was rueful rather than bitter. "Tom was right when he used to say I treated everything like a business negotiation, including family." They talked for another 20 minutes, the conversation meandering through memories of their parents, reflections on their different career paths, and tentative discussions about what their relationship might look like going forward. It wasn't the reconciliation Sarah had hoped for when she first received Victoria's invitation, but it was something more valuable: honest communication between two adults who understood each other's priorities and limitations. "Sarah, there's something else," Victoria said as their conversation neared its end. "I know you probably can't tell me details, but I heard through industry contacts that you might be taking a position at the Pentagon. If that's true, I wanted you to know that I think it's exactly where you belong." The comment revealed that Victoria had finally understood what Sarah had tried to explain that night in Manhattan: that some people found meaning in service rather than wealth, in protecting institutions rather than building empires. After they hung up, Sarah sat in her car for several minutes, watching the sun set over the North Carolina landscape she'd called home for the past 3 years. The Pentagon position would mean leaving familiar surroundings and comfortable routines, but it would also mean expanding her impact on military security and technology policy. She thought about the choice Victoria had faced: accept limitations or risk destruction, and realized she was facing a similar decision point, though with more positive options. She could remain at Fort Bragg in a position she understood and performed well, or she could accept the challenge of shaping policy at the highest levels of defense planning. The next morning, Sarah called Colonel Hayes and accepted the Pentagon position. 6 weeks later, she was settling into an office in the Pentagon's outer ring, responsible for developing security frameworks that would govern how the military interacted with technology companies for decades to come. Her first major policy proposal included provisions for voluntary disclosure of information sources by contractors, graduated sanctions for security violations, and clear protocols for family members of military personnel who worked in the technology sector. The framework was designed to prevent situations like Victory Tech from developing, while still enabling innovation and private sector contributions to national defense. Victoria continued leading Victory Tech's evolution into a major commercial AI company, her innovations eventually influencing everything from medical diagnosis to educational technology. They exchanged emails occasionally, brief updates about career developments and personal milestones that maintained connection without crossing professional boundaries. Sarah never regretted the choice she had made that night in Manhattan. She had chosen institutional integrity over family loyalty, professional duty over personal comfort. In doing so, she had not only protected military security, but also forced both sisters to confront who they really were and what they truly valued. The price of that clarity had been the relationship they had both hoped to rebuild. But the alternative, compromising principles for the sake of family harmony, would have cost Sarah something far more valuable than Victoria's approval. Sometimes the most important victories were the ones that required you to disappoint the people you loved most. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.